Pan frei, plassotin, via libera per il strens, via libera ai treni.
Here's a brain teaser for you. What do these three things have in common? Theistic Satanists, the Army's Psychological Warfare Division, and the people running one of the worst and widest-ranging child exploitation rings in the history of the country. This guy, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. Aquino's experience in Vietnam more or less directly led to his later career as basically the father of modern-day psychological warfare, as described in his paper From PSYOP to Mind War, which describes the methods and goals of psychological warfare. That's right, this guy is the person who came up with the term PSYOP. Michael Aquino was a Satanist, being a high-ranking member of Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. Now, to be clear, there is nothing inherently evil or wrong about being a member of the Church of Satan these days, given that it's basically goth atheism.
You need to shut the fuck up!
However, in Aquino's case, he was not on board with the comparative lack of literally worshipping Satan, and split off into a theistic satanic sect, the Temple of Set. He formed the Temple of Set with his wife Lilith, who ran a New York coven called the Lilith Grotto. This is her. Now, on to the third major aspect of him. Wait. So you're telling me that in addition to being the father of modern psychological warfare and coining the term PSYOP, this dork is also the LeBron James of child abuse? Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. But look at him. Those don't look like the eyebrows of a satanic pedophile.
Officer, I got one question for you. What are those?
The Presidio scandal. In 1986, allegations of sexual abuse were raised against teacher and Baptist minister Reverend Gary Hambright, who taught at the Presidio Child Development Center at the Presidio base in San Francisco. Upon finding significant physical and psychological evidence of abuse amongst children in Hambright's class, including at least 5 of whom had contracted chlamydia, the children were later questioned and mentioned being taken out of the classroom into a private residence, where they were also abused by 2 other adults who they called Mikey and Shamby. The kids had a consistent description of the house as having a dark interior filled with all kinds of satanic stuff, as well as a soundproof room with soft material lining the walls. Additionally, when driven around the area, multiple victims separately identified the same house as the one that they'd been taken to. Now, who are the owners of the house? Now, this might surprise you, but Michael and Lilith Aquino. Shocking. Now, where did Aquino work at the time? The Presidio base. The cops got a search warrant, searched the house, and dark interior, lots of satanic crap, padded room, tons of video cameras and equipment, all checks out. So, this seems pretty bad, right? Presumably he gets prosecuted. He does not get prosecuted. A fact that Aquino maintains proves his innocence. There were several setbacks to the investigation, including a pair of fires about 3 weeks apart that destroyed Hambright's classroom in the development center, as well as one in the administrative building next door where Aquino worked, in which a number of unnamed records and documents were destroyed. Now, despite the Army's insistence that these 2 fires were accidents and unrelated, the ATF was adamant in their reports that the fires were arson. Yep, that's right, I said the ATF. Do you have any idea how evil and or willfully bureaucratic you have to be to make the ATF look like the reasonable ones? Aquino claims the positive chlamydia tests are inconclusive because they were only preliminary positives and were somehow misplaced and then disappeared before a full lab result sheet could be recorded. Alright, so why was he not prosecuted? To answer that, we have to do a quick run-through of a different kitty-diddling scandal that he was implicated in. The Franklin scandal from the last episode. Alright, here's the spark notes. In Paul Bonacci's testimony against Lawrence King, he identified Aquino only as the colonel, but was able to pick him out of a lineup and described him as the ringleader as well as King's direct superior. Lawrence King's photographer, Rusty Nelson, identified Aquino as the man he had seen King hand over suitcases full of cash to. King had reportedly told Nelson that Aquino had been involved in the Iran-Contra drugs for guns affair. Now, Gary Webb, of Being Murdered for pointing out the CIA's connection to the crack epidemic fame, and strangely, also a reporter for the same newspaper that initially broke the Presidio story, the San Jose Mercury News, brought up this guy, Joe Ruscianello, as an involved party in the Iran-Contra thing. The same scandal that multiple other witnesses implicated Aquino as being involved in as well. So, how does this all relate? Well, the question that we were asking was, why was Aquino not prosecuted for the Presidio thing? Well, let's look at who the San Francisco DA was at the time. This guy, Joe Ruscianello. He was the U.S. Attorney for the Northern California District, and he was the person who declined to prosecute Aquino on federal charges. So, that might have something to do with it.
Was this more evident than in the small South American country of Guyana in the winter of 1978? The place was called Jonestown. On the surface, it appeared to be a gathering of ethnically diverse families assembled by the Reverend Jim Jones to live their dream of a racially harmonious society.
This reporter spoke to many Jonestown people. They all insisted that it was a peaceful and productive place in which to live.
Are you happy here?
Oh, I should say I am. I've never been any happier in my life.
Despite the outward appearance of normality, reports of sexual abuse, torture, and members being held against their will filtered back to the United States. San Francisco Congressman Leo Ryan flew to Guyana to investigate the allegations.
I'm very glad to be here. This is a congressional inquiry. I think that all of you know that I'm here to find out more about questions that have been raised about your operation here. But I can tell you right now that from the few conversations I've had with some of the folks here already this evening, that whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe that this is the best thing that ever happened to them in their whole life.
The events of the following day would shock the world.
The Question of Jonestown, from the CIA Reading Room, CIA.gov, taken from the Philadelphia Inquirer, 5th February 1982, sanitized copy approved for release, 2010, article by Frank Rossi, The Question of Jonestown. What's happening right now for John Judge is embodied in the 3 fat notebooks of newspaper clippings resting to his right on a mohair sofa that looks as if it's going to fall apart within 30 seconds. The notebooks, there are 2 more, just as fat in the bedroom, contain thousands of stories on Jim Jones and the deaths of 900 cultists at the People's Temple in Guyana. Judge says he believes that Jonestown was part of a 30-year CIA mind control experiment called MKUltra. I came to the conclusion myself when I studied various assassinations and the patterns of history, says Judge, of the various intelligence operations. I smelled a rat in Jonestown within the first few days. The questions. Judge and Meredith based their CIA theory on circumstantial evidence, but it's obvious to them that there are still too many unanswered questions about Jonestown. Right after the deaths occurred, Hoeg Levins of the Daily News reported that the Guyanese government, with the help of the U.S. Embassy, had kept reporters out of Jonestown, lied about certain aspects of the deaths, and destroyed documents pertaining to Jones. These records, Levin's articles say, linked Jones to Guyanese Prime Minister Forbes Burnham and a couple of shady deals. The first thing that tipped me, Judge says, was the change in body count. The original article said 408, then they said 712. Sandy tracked down 6 different explanations for the change in the body count. The final figure was 912. The dumbest explanation of all, according to Sandy Meredith, was that bodies were found underneath other bodies. According to Inquirer files, the bodies on top of bodies statement was made by U.S. Air Force Captain John Muscatelli. The question Judge and Meredith ask is how 400 bodies, 100 of which were children, could cover 512 other bodies. Rounded up. I think people were literally searched out and rounded up over a period of days and either killed at the camp or killed in the woods and dragged back dead to the camp, Judge says. Judge and Meredith also point out that Jim Jones was a close friend of a government agent now dead, and that Jones's religious empire blossomed in the early 60s after he returned from a stay in a region of Brazil where the agent happened to be stationed. That Dr. Leslie Mutu, Guyanese chief medical examiner, testified that 80 to 90% of the Jonestown victims did not commit suicide but were murdered. Stanley Clayton, a Jonestown cult member who escaped the carnage, told the Chicago Tribune the same thing in a copyrighted November 24, 1978 article. That Lawrence L. Layton, the father of Jim Jones' gun-toting lieutenant Larry Layton, had worked with various government intelligence agencies on chemical warfare projects and possibly worked directly with the CIA on mind control experiments. All of which shows Judge and Meredith say that the full story of Jonestown has not yet been told. Pont Saint Spirit poisoning. Did the CIA spread LSD? From BBC News, 2010, nearly 60 years ago, a French town was hit by a sudden outbreak of hallucinations which left 5 people dead and many seriously ill. For years, it was blamed on bread contaminated with psychedelic fungus, but that theory is now being challenged. That view remained largely unchallenged until 2009, when an American investigative journalist, Hank Albarelli, revealed a CIA document labeled Re. Pont Saint-Esprit in F. Olson files. SO Span, France operative file, inclusive Olson intel files, hand carried to Berlin, tell him to see to it that these are buried. F. Olson is Frank Olson, a CIA scientist who, at the time of the Pont Saint-Esprit incident, led research for the agency into the drug LSD. As an additional note, he was also the only one that was admitted to having been killed directly as a covert administration of the drug LSD after resigning from his position as the chief of this, the chief operative, or however you want to phrase it, of this chemical warfare division, after having a moral crisis. So continuing, David Berlin, meanwhile, was executive director of the Rockefeller Commission, created by the White House in 1975 to investigate abuses carried out worldwide by the CIA. Albarelli believes the Pont Saint-Esprit and Frank Olson files mentioned in the document would show, if they had not been buried, that the CIA was experimenting on the townspeople by dosing them with LSD. The conclusion drawn at the time was that one of the town's bakeries, the Roche Brienne, was the source of the poisoning. It's possible, Albarelli says, that LSD was put in the bread. It is well known that biological warfare scientists around the world, including some in Britain, were experimenting with LSD in the early 1950s. Albarelli says he has found a top-secret report issued in 1949 by the research director of the Edgewood Arsenal, where many U.S. government LSD experiments were carried out, which states that the Army should do everything possible to launch field experiments using the drug.
.02 a.m. on April the 19th, 1995. That's the moment when 27-year-old Timothy McVeigh exploded his way into the US history books, blowing up a gigantic truck bomb outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. The blast annihilated the building. It ended 168 lives, including those of 19 children. It also sent a shockwave throughout the nation. No one could believe such an atrocity was carried out by a fellow American, especially one as normal-seeming as McVeigh.
Unsurprisingly, perhaps, the federal government has made it as difficult as possible for the general public to access this information or find out more about these claims. After granting the interview discussing McVeigh's military connections, Hammer was placed on lockdown and even prevented from contacting his attorneys. After receiving Nichols' sworn declaration that McVeigh was an undercover Army operative, attorney Jesse Trentadue was prevented from gaining access to depose Nichols by a federal judge. The judge in McVeigh's own case also placed sensitive documents obtained by the defense during discovery under seal, documents that the producer of Oklahoma City bombing documentary A Noble Lie claims prove these connections. So perhaps we can start with just laying out the parts of the record that we can all agree on about Timothy McVeigh and his background.
Well, he actually served in the U.S. Army. He was on the security detail for General Schwarzkopf, at the time the Allied Supreme Commander of Allied Forces in the first Persian Gulf War back in 1990. And he was a sharpshooter and a sniper. And he was commended, actually, when he was in custody in the Denver Federal Courthouse awaiting trial. The Army had to award him 2 medals of commendation for his stellar service. As far as the Special Forces, where it's still murky, we weren't able to find any documentation to support the fact that he did work Special Forces. But we do know that he was an employee by the CIA. He was a drug smuggler and a professional assassin. And this was in the 2.5 years leading up to the devastation of April 19, 1995. We also know that he was on a joint task force with the ATF and the FBI trying to recruit people to help him blow up federal buildings in 7 different cities around the United States.
What you have just said will be stunning to those who have only heard the mainstream narrative of McVeigh. So let's talk about the pieces of evidence that document what you're talking about.
We were able to go through the defense counsel records. Stephen Jones was very generous in giving us access to those records. They're stored at a particular institution on the campus of UT Austin. And through the hard work of Wendy Painting, one of our key researchers, oddly enough, she was born and raised less than an hour from where McVeigh was raised in upstate New York. But she had paid several visits to Austin and was able to access these records. The curator of the institution was very kind to us as a film crew. And I had the honor of actually joining her about the 2.5, 3 months she was down there, off and on over the course of 9 months. I joined her for 3 days and saw what she was going through and the records. I mean, this is what the defense counsel, through a discovery process, was able to put together. Unfortunately, the trial only lasted 3.5 weeks, so they weren't able to present a lot of this evidence. And it was by the efforts of Judge Mace, who was the presiding judge. He put a lot of these records under seal, was never allowed to present to the defense or to the jury or the prosecution. The prosecution wasn't even aware of the records. So it was a very stunted and very unfortunate set of events on that short trial.
So what does this evidence amount to? Are these claims true? Until McVeigh's full defense records are unsealed, or witnesses like Nichols and Hammer are deposed and their testimony investigated by a grand jury, researchers will have to rely on evidence in the public record to corroborate these claims and arrive at a better understanding of the bombing and McVeigh's role in it. We do know that in August of 1993, Director Bill Bean recorded some footage of Camp Grafton, a National Guard training center that provided explosives and demolitions training, while scouting locations for a film shoot. While filming at Camp Grafton, 1.5 years after McVeigh's supposed discharge from the Army, Bean had an encounter with a man he now firmly believes to have been McVeigh.
So what's your job?
What was that?
What's your job?
I'm a parts clerk.
Oh, you just parking this one, huh?
Yeah, basically.
Hi, my name is Bill Bean. I work in the film industry. On August 3rd, 1993, I was at Camp Grafton, North Dakota. Camp Grafton is a military training academy for the United States Army, the Army Reserve, and the National Guard. The reason I was there was to scout locations for a film project I was working on. I was given a tour of the base. It's designated by Colonel Dahl. We were by the motor pool, and there were a large group of tanks that were parked there. I saw two soldiers parking an armored vehicle. I asked the billeting director if I could go over and interview the soldiers. So I walked over to the armored vehicle. It had a porthole in the back. I entered inside. The soldier who had been driving the vehicle was closing a hatch in the front. When he turned around, he looked at me and he froze. I had my video camera running, and I said to him, "What's your job?" And he looked at me and he said, "What?" I said, "What's your job?" He says, "I'm nobody, I'm just a parts clerk." On August 3rd, 1993 is when I videotaped and interviewed Timothy McVeigh a year and a half after he was supposedly out of the military completely.
So what's your job? What was that?
What's your job?
I'm a parts clerk.
Oh, you just parking this one, huh?
Yeah, basically.
Was McVeigh involved in explosives training at Camp Grafton after his supposed discharge? Camp Grafton denies that McVeigh was ever present on base, but beyond the physical resemblance to McVeigh, Professor Michael Blomgren of the University of Utah conducted a voice analysis of the tape and found an 86% match between the person speaking on the tape and audio of McVeigh's interview on 60 Minutes.
I ended up going to Professor Blomgren at the University of Utah, who's in the speech pathology department. He did a voice forensics test. He did various computer and scientific tests on it, and did human voice analysis tests also. His final report to me was that he would testify in a court of law that this is Timothy McVeigh. He had compared it to a 60 Minutes interview and found a near-perfect, near-exact match.
This footage is possible corroboration of McVeigh's story, but it is only that. Possible corroboration. On February 26, 1993, at 12:19 p.m., a truck bomb detonated in the underground parking garage of Tower 1 of the World Trade Center complex. The bomb was a urea nitrate device enhanced with hydrogen gas. The bomb ripped a 30-meter wide hole through 4 sublevels of concrete. 6 people were killed and 1,042 injured as smoke poured into the towers. Investigators found the axle of the Ryder truck that was used in the bombing and were able to trace the vehicle identification number to the man who rented the truck, Mohammed Salameh. Eventually, blame for the bombing came to rest with Ramzi Youssef, whose uncle, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, or KSM, confessed to masterminding the 9/11 attacks from A to Z in a highly dubious, heavily redacted confession extracted after 4 years of torture in a secret CIA prison, and after having his sons abducted and used as bargaining chips in the interrogation process. Media fascination with the case was quick to focus on Ramzi Youssef. But during the investigation, some startling information came to light.
Last winter, the FBI was praised for its speed in cracking the case of the World Trade Center bombing and bringing 4 suspects to trial. Now, there is some evidence that the FBI may have known of the plot in advance through an informant and might even have stopped the bombing that killed 6 people. Correspondent Jacqueline Adams has the story.
FBI agents might have been able to prevent last February's deadly explosion at New York's World Trade Center. They discussed secretly substituting harmless powder for the explosives, but they didn't, according to the FBI's own informant, Imad Salem. Unbeknownst to the FBI at the time, Salem recorded many of his conversations with his handlers.
I'm holding 903 pages of draft transcripts.
William Kunstler represents Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman and several others charged with conspiring to blow up a series of New York City landmarks 4 months after the World Trade Center bombing. That case has not yet gone to trial. Kunstler confirmed newspaper reports of the Salem transcripts. In one, Salem complains to an FBI agent, "Since the bomb went off, I feel terrible. I feel bad. I feel here is people who don't listen." The agent replies, "Hey, I mean, it wasn't like you didn't try and I didn't try. You can't force people to do the right thing."
There is material in here to show gross governmental misconduct.
Today, attorneys for the defendants in the ongoing World Trade Center bombing case formally asked for the transcripts of Salem's tapes.
Quite frankly, beyond me, why now, the fourth week into the trial, we still don't have these materials.
Prosecutors have refused to comment publicly, but legal experts say the defense may have no right to those transcripts.
It's not a defense to a crime to say, if only the government had stopped me, I wouldn't have done it. So this isn't material that ordinarily the defense would be entitled to.
In court today, a witness from the Ford Motor Company linked debris recovered from the explosion site to a Ford van where defendant Mohammed Salamat was arrested less than a week after the bombing. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, New York.
As reported by CBS News, the New York Times, and other respected news organizations at the time, Ahmad Salem was an ex-Egyptian army officer turned FBI informant, and was essential in helping convict others in the bombing. However, it was Salem's contention that he had agreed to supply fake explosives to the bombers, and he was overruled by his FBI handlers. Salem, perhaps experienced in the machinations of black ops, had the sense to tape some of his telephone conversations with his FBI handlers, including FBI Special Agent John Antichev. This is a recording of one of Salem's conversations with Antichev.
Everything was submitted with a receipt, and now it's questionable.
It's not questionable. It's like a little out of ordinary.
Okay.
You know.
All right. I don't think it was. If that's what you think, guys, fine. But I don't think that, because we was start already building the bomb, which is went off in the World Trade Center. It was built by supervision from the Bureau and the DA, and we was all informed about it, and we know that the bomb start to be built. By who? By your confidential informant. What a wonderful, great case.
Wow.
And then he put his head in the sand and said, "Oh, no, that's not true. He is son of a bitch." Okay, it's built with a different way in another place, and that's it.
In the taped conversation, Salem makes it clear that the FBI informant had in fact gone ahead and built the bomb. Antichev says nothing in response. Hundreds of hours of taped conversations exist between Salem and his FBI handlers, but they were never used in the trials of the bombing conspirators. To this day, the FBI refuses to acknowledge their foreknowledge of the attacks or the fact that their informant built the bomb.
Hi, I'm Richard Gage, AIA, licensed architect of over 20 years and member of the American Institute of Architects. I'm founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, a non-profit organization of well over 1,000 technical and building professionals. According to official government reports, the fires weakened the structural steel framing of both twin towers, leading to sudden, progressive, and total collapses. Unknown to most people, a third steel frame high-rise, World Trade Center 7, was also destroyed. Critical questions have been raised by more than 1,500 architects and engineers about the official explanations for the destruction of all three of these buildings. Along with more than 10,000 other concerned individuals, these professionals, collectively comprising more than 25,000 years of experience, have signed our petition. They're calling for a new investigation into the destruction of these three World Trade Center high-rises. This call is based on evidence that reveals a very different destruction scenario than reported by government engineers. As coherent sets of scientific facts are brought into focus by the experts, the data, and the witnesses in this film, you'll come to a much greater understanding of the events of 9/11 and will be in a position to draw your own informed conclusions.
some truth. They may give you lies, but they never share the whole story.
What would you like to know about September 11th, the official story there, Senator?
Well, start with Building 7. Again, I don't know that you can find structural engineers other than the ones that had the corrupt investigation inside NIST that would say that that thing didn't come down in any other way than a controlled demolition. I mean, you just look at that. You talk about molten steel. Again, you listen to the documentary Bravo 7. There's an awful lot of questions. You know, who ordered the removal and then destruction of all that evidence? Totally contrary to any other firefighting investigation procedures. I mean, who ordered that? Who was in charge? I think there's some basic information. Where's all the documentation from the NIST investigation? No, there are a host of questions that I want, and I will be asking, quite honestly, now that my eyes have been opened up. I've talked to former Congressman Kurt Weldon now. I will work with him to expose what he's willing to expose as well. I will work with him to expose what he's willing to expose as well.
Wow, so we may actually see hearings about this.
9/11, which would pursue us here, has lost its power under these friendly trees. So shall we burn thee once again this night, and in the flames that eat thine effigy, we shall read the sign.
You are watching a mock human sacrifice, part of a ritual that takes place in a secluded redwood grove in Northern California each summer. The sacrifice is made in front of a 40-foot stone owl and mirrors the ancient practice of child sacrifice to Molech practiced by the Canaanites. However, this is not a gathering of fringe cult members. In fact, those attending the ritual are members of the ultra-exclusive Bohemian Club of San Francisco, a group whose members include prominent academics, captains of industry, and politicians. Past members of the Bohemian Club have included President Eisenhower, President Nixon, and President Reagan. Current members include former President George Herbert Walker Bush and his son, President George Walker Bush. In July of 2000, researcher and documentary filmmaker Alex Jones became the first non-member ever to sneak into the Bohemian Grove with a hidden video camera. His footage of this mock human sacrifice, called the Cremation of Care Ritual, remains the only footage of the ritual available to the public. His documentary Dark Secrets Inside Bohemian Grove contains this footage of the mock human sacrifice committed at the Grove.
Hail, fellowship's eternal flame! Once again, midsummer sets us free!
In June 2007, Alex Jones was anonymously sent the Bohemian Club member roster for 2006. The roster, unsurprisingly, contained a number of well-known names, such as David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, George H.W. Bush, Gerald Ford, and others. But academia was also well represented in the list. Of course, most of the academics on the Bohemian Club roster came from Californian universities, but some came from universities outside of California. One of those is Professor Barry Cooper of the University of Calgary. Barry Cooper is a professor of political theory and Canadian politics at the University of Calgary in Western Canada. He's also a fellow of the Canadian Defence and Foreign Affairs Institute, the Royal Society of Canada, the Institute for Health Economics, and the Centre for Military and Strategic Studies. He's also closely connected to Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, being a part of the so-called Calgary School of Political Philosophy, from which Harper sprang. The Corbett Report recently talked to Barry Cooper about his involvement in the Bohemian Club of San Francisco. Dr. Barry Cooper, I understand that you're a member of the Bohemian Club of San Francisco.
Well, I am. It's a social club, and it's one of the attributes of it is we don't talk about it.
I see. Is there anything that you can talk about regarding that club?
No.
I see. Are you planning on going to the Grove this year?
I think I will be, yes.
Oh, I see. Have you ever participated in the cremation of care ritual?
No.
No? I see. Have you ever invited Prime Minister Stephen Harper to the Grove?
No.
I see. Do you ever mention the Grove when you're talking to your students about the power structures that govern global geopolitics?
I doubt it.
Really? Don't you think it would be a good idea to talk about 2-week outings with presidents and advisors and academics and other luminaries in front of 40-foot stone owls?
This is James Alefantis. Alefantis' establishment, Comet Ping Pong, gained worldwide attention when allegations that a pedophile ring was being operated, in part, out of this establishment. This investigation is now known as Pizzagate and is one of the first ever worldwide citizen investigations. James Alefantis is an entrepreneur, an avid art collector, and owns a few shops and restaurants in the Washington, D.C. area. Not only is he the proprietor of Comet Pizzeria and Ping Pong, Buck's Fishing and Camping, as well as several other establishments, but according to GQ magazine, James is the 49th most influential person in Washington, D.C. Comet Pizza has hosted many Democratic fundraisers and events, with one of those Democrats being Hillary Clinton herself. The Federal Election Commission reports that money was donated to James Alefantis and Comet Ping Pong by Hillary Clinton, amongst many others, and to top it off, even geopolitical major player George Soros, through his Soros American Bridge PAC, sent Alefantis nearly $22,000 at one point. Alefantis' ex-boyfriend is David Brock, an American political agent, author, and commentator who founded the liberal media watchdog group Media Matters for America. In late 2013, Brock founded Correct the Record, which was described by the New York Times as Hillary Clinton's own personal media watchdog. In short, both Brock and Alefantis were heavily involved in the Hillary Clinton campaign and have been major players working in the background of the Democratic Party for a very long time. Mr. Alefantis has, on record, visited the White House at least 5 times, and so it wouldn't be controversial to say that James is connected to some of the most important and influential people in Washington. In fact, here is a letter from Hillary Clinton thanking James for the dinner, cooking with the Fratelli Podesta, and here is another Instagram picture where James is photographing President Barack Obama at the White House playing a little ping pong with a young child. James Alefantis is known as Jimmy Comet on Instagram, and online researchers discovered an incredible number of very strange photos, many with very young children, including very disturbing references found on his account. James's account has since been switched to private, but his posts were collected prior to him doing so. Many of the comments and hashtags made on the images of his Instagram account, and many other accounts linked to Mr. Alefantis and Comet Pizza, included code words well known and established by the Federal Bureau of Investigation to be codes used by those engaged in acts of pedophilia. For instance, cheese equals little girl, pizza equals girl, hot dog equals boy. You get the point. We're going to go over several of the pictures in question as it is necessary to give context to the accusations made in this case. Out of respect, decency, and to protect the innocent, the children's eyes have been covered. So the first one we have here is an unnamed baby being fed pizza. The comments say hashtag first pizza and another that says new Comet ad, as in a new ad for Comet Pizzeria. Here's another one, a picture of a German baby doll for sale, and the comments say way overpriced. Now, nothing too damning here. Maybe James is a doll collector. Let's move on. Here we find another unnamed baby with the most alarming hashtag of hotard, which is a slang for a hoe or whore and a retard, or someone that is mentally handicapped. Very strange to write such a thing on a picture of a baby. Here we have another unnamed baby drinking some milk, and notice the hashtag Karis James. We're going to be seeing a lot more of that as we move on. Here we have another hashtag of Karis James in reference to an entirely different child, and apparently Karis James loves to spend euros. It's just very odd seeing a child posing with money like this. Here's another unnamed baby in a shopping cart with the hashtag Karis James yet again, and I must mention, the eyes of this girl in the picture are saggy and she looks really tired. Not sure who this child is and why she is in this basket and why she is being displayed on James's Instagram account. And yet another unnamed or unidentified girl with the hashtag I love chocolate cake. This next image shows a young girl in a beauty pageant, and she is highlighted saying, I just want my pizza, which when knowing the FBI codes means young girl, which is pretty disturbing. Now, one or two pictures of a few girls on an Instagram account isn't really a big deal, but when you get so many like this, it really starts to raise questions. Here again we have two unidentified children, supposedly born 1 year ago today, as it says, with the hashtag Karis James yet again. Who are these children? Why are the parents not tagged? Why are the names of the children not given? These are all pretty pertinent questions. One of the most disturbing images is the one where this young girl here is taped down to the table while the commenter says, new seating area for your guests, hilaire or hilarious, and Kate Damon there tags Karis James yet again. Here's Jimmy Comet showing off a pile of pills and bills, and notice in the comments here it says ping pong in London. This next post shows James in an article expressing his love for playing ping pong in Germany, as well as in London, at a place called Dr. Pong's, something we'll revisit later. Here's Jimmy Comet displaying 3 masked children, which was also linked to another very creepy account called Mr. Solier. Not sure who these children are, how old these children are, what this is a reference to, if this is an art piece. Do the children know this is an art piece? One of the most controversial images is the one where a man here is holding a very young child with what has been identified as a sex bracelet around the man and child's necks. Jimmy Comet here tags chicken lovers, with a chicken lover defined as a homosexual man who is attracted to underage boys. Yet another hashtag Karis James, and the most strange and downright disturbing comments such as, what in the butt? In this next image here, we have a large refrigerated room, and the comments here are just flat out creepy. Just rinse it off when you're done, says one. Just a pile of money under a sheet, says another. Hashtag murder and hashtag kill room are all very alarming. What are these people referring to? Where is this room? Do these people visit it? And if so, what do they do there? Some of the other images from James's account are very risque. Here we have Comet Pizza being jokingly renamed as the Long Dong Pizza Shop. Someone tagging Comet Ping Pong here with 2 people giving oral pleasure on a giant slice of pizza. And here is another. and another, and another. In this post, we see the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it says Democratic Party, Republican Party, and the box checked is Pizza Party. This post is quite disturbing in that the comments we find someone saying, "Whip me up a Haitian special, extra cheese," which once again, according to the FBI code words, would mean a young Haitian girl. So obviously there's something going on here that is a lot more lewd, lascivious, and downright perverse than what any reasonable person would believe should be going on at a children's pizzeria. We'll just leave it at that. Before we move on, I just want to mention 3 things, all of which are just creepy and in general downright bizarre. First, the name James Alefantis can basically be translated in French to mean "I like children." I offer no other commentary on this other than to point out that fact. And lastly, and this is something that is not speculative at all, the profile picture of James Alefantis, or Jimmy Comet, is the Greek god Antinous, who apparently was deified as a living god, and it just so happens that Antinous was sexually attracted to young boys. We'll get back to Jimmy Comet's Instagram in just a bit. This is John Podesta. John Podesta was the chairman of the 2016 Hillary Clinton presidential campaign and has previously served as chief of staff to President Bill Clinton and counselor to President Barack Obama. John has had close ties to Washington for a very long time. John has been in the inner circle of some very, very powerful people within the upper echelons of the Democratic Party for a very, very long time. WikiLeaks has released thousands of John Podesta's emails, and after many researchers rifled through them, it was found that there were an enormous amount of strangely worded references to pizza and hot dogs. Needless to say, it is very clear to see that John and many of the people whom he was communicating with are speaking in code. And not only are they speaking in code, but it is the same code that has been well established by the FBI. A few emails worthy of mentioning are here. Here we have an email discussing that the White House is flying in $65,000 worth of hot dogs and pizza. And yes, you could argue that the White House spends a good deal on high-profile events, and thus it is silly to assume that this email has anything to do with child trafficking, but really? $65,000 to fly in hot dogs and pizza? Who flies in hot dogs and pizza? Does this hot dog and pizza catering service have a name? And $65,000? At the very least, these people are wasting an insane amount of taxpayer money. Oh, and one last thing. It is protocol that all the food served at the White House is prepared at the White House due to worries of contamination and poisoning and the like. So all the food at the White House is made at the White House. So what does this email mean? This next one is addressed to John Podesta and discusses dreaming of a hot dog stand in Hawaii. Are hot dogs really that good in Hawaii? I've been there and I was never once told about the legendary Hawaiian kosher footlong. What is the name of this hot dog stand? Does this person and John Podesta vacation together? Very odd and very disconcerting knowing what the code word hot dog means. I believe this one comes from Hillary Clinton's emails herself, and it says, "With fingers crossed, the old rabbit's foot out of the attic, I will be sacrificing a chicken in the backyard to Moloch." Enough said. The Podesta brothers have been linked to the disappearance of a young girl named Madeleine McCann after many people online noticed the artist's sketches of Madeleine's supposed kidnappers are a dead ringer to the Podestas. Here are the police sketches overlaid with the pictures of the Podesta brothers. According to emails released by WikiLeaks, John's secretary was handling his emails the days Madeleine went missing, and further, the Podesta brothers have been confirmed to have been staying in Portugal the day of her disappearance at the house of former Member of Parliament Sir Clement Freud, who is a convicted pedophile and who happened to live a third of a mile down the street from where Madeleine McCann was abducted. An expose of Tony Podesta's house, lifestyle, and art collection were highlighted in Washington Life magazine. Within the article, we find pictures of his house, very clearly displaying art centrally themed around children. In one corner of the house, we find 2 large paintings displaying children laying on the ground. On the couch, we see in another room stuffed animals on display. The article begins by saying, "If you've ever dreamed of strolling through a museum with a slice of pizza and a glass of wine in hand, you need to befriend super lobbyist Tony Podesta. Known about town as a legendary political fix-it man, Tony has turned his home into a shrine for contemporary art, including some of his favorite artists." The article goes on to say that Tony had recently come from a Hillary Clinton campaign fundraiser and that he has worked for the likes of Walmart, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Wells Fargo, and Lockheed Martin. So no small potatoes there. Finally, the article concludes and says that he regularly opens his house to casual pizza parties, co-hosted by his friend James Alefantis, owner of Comet Ping Pong. Tony's first major art purchase, and one according to the article, the piece that is never taken down, is the 2,000-pound bronze statue by Louis Bourgeois called the Arch of Hysteria. According to the National Gallery of Canada, the Arch of Hysteria was created from Bourgeois' interest in the physical, emotional, and psychological aspects of pain and fear. The piece was inspired by neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot, a physician who sought to represent hysteria by documenting the performances of his female patients. The physical tension of the hysterical arch, an intense muscular contraction resulting in immobility and paralysis of the limbs, is emblematic of an extreme emotional state. Regardless of the artist, it seems like a very morbid thing to have as your prized possession hanging in your living room. It's also been noted that the Arch of Hysteria seems to mimic the same position that the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer would leave his decapitated victims in. Comet Pizza has a close connection and trust with their patrons. Here's a clip of the manager explaining Comet's relationship with its customers.
The secret is it's an empowerment. An empowerment, by definition, is trust. So, I trust that the relationship that I have with the customers is one where they understand that I'm looking out for them, and in response, they look out for us.
The promoter for the bands at Comet Ping Pong is Sasha Lord. Sasha Lord previously worked as an outdoor facilitator at Hemlock Overlook, specializing in at-risk populations, volunteered with the Girl Scouts of Santiam Council, helping to facilitate Girl Scouts beyond bars, and she also worked for the Girl Scouts of the nation's capital, running an outreach Girl Scout troop at the Prince William County Juvenile Detention Center. So basically, Sasha Lord has worked with children a good portion of her adult life, and now she is recruited to be a scouting/talent agent for the back room of a seedy, very politically connected children's pizzeria? Seems reasonable. This video is of an artist named Majestic Ape, who also goes by Amanda Kleiman, apparently, and has performed at Comet with her band Heavy Breathing. The video is of Sasha Lord's birthday party, and you can clearly hear Majestic Ape speaking casually about special pizza and discussing with the crowd the favors that Sasha provides. You can also hear in the crowd people laughing and casually speaking about pedophilia.
It is the day of the birth of our Lord, Sasha Lord. If you are like me, you love Sasha, or if you don't, you want perks from her. Things like free pizza. Have any of you enjoyed this special pizza here tonight called the Hottie? And Jerry is known to hang out down here. He likes the world sounds. Tamales.
And little boys.
And children.
No.
We all have preferences.
Meanwhile in Dallas, on August 13th, 1973, only 5 days after Coral's death, police raided the apartment of a certain John Norman. after receiving a tip about a possible homosexual prostitution ring. John Norman was at this point 46 and had already accumulated a pretty sizable pervert rap sheet, having been arrested in Houston for sexual assault in 1954, 1956, 1960, in California for sexual assault in 1963, and in 1970 was convicted on federal charges of distributing obscene material and sentenced to 15 months in prison. Following his release in 1971, he set up the Odyssey Foundation, the sex trafficking ring for which he was being raided, in media res. Following the raid on his apartment, police found photos and contact info for teenage boys, along with catalogs intended for distribution to clients. These included photographs of the boys, referred to in the literature and also hereafter in the video as fellows, that you could pay to sponsor in exchange for 2 to 3 days of company. Additionally, the Dallas police found a client list of his, consisting of a filing cabinet full of about 30,000 pink index cards, with between 50 and 100,000 names of clients, along with their contact info and sexual preferences. These were then passed on to the State Department for further investigation. Oh, so they went on and, arrested all the clients sponsoring the fellas, right? Haha. No, of course not. They declared the index cards irrelevant to the investigation and then burned them. As a side note, in 1977, a Dallas police lieutenant named Harold Hancock testified that the client list included high-ranking government officials and prominent public figures and celebrities. So I guess they've just always been like that. After fleeing Dallas and moving to Chicago, he began living under a different name, Steve Gurwell, because it was the 70s and you used to just be able to do that. Following getting that sorted out, he immediately went and molested at least 10 teenage boys. By November, and keep in mind, he left in August, late August, early September. So by November, the cops were, on the lookout following multiple reports of a Steve Gurwell moving in and starting to molest everyone around him. On the 14th of November, Norman was arrested and charged with 5 counts of indecent liberties with a child and 8 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and taken to Cook County Jail. From what I can find, a little more than 2 years later, he had his bail of $36,000 paid by someone in California and was released awaiting trial. Now, I'm going to take the next 2 paragraphs from Wikipedia verbatim because, they're accurate for once. In December 1976, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison and sent to Pontiac Correctional Center. Shortly before he was released on bail, Norman began his next sex operation, the Delta Project, like from the name of the video, and began publishing a newsletter called Hermes. From Cook County Jail, Norman sent out 3 newsletters using the jail's printing press, claiming the Delta Project aimed to provide educational, travel, and self-development opportunities for qualified young men of character and integrity, and that Delta dorms were being established across the U.S., with each dorm having 2 to 4 cadets, overseen by a Don. Let me repeat that. He was publishing the kid sex newsletter and catalog from prison. Good God. Anyway, police alleged that the cadets were underage male prostitutes recruited in Chicago. Yeah, no shit. In a May 1977 interview with the Tribune, Norman denied that Project Delta was sexual in nature and claimed to have sent the newsletter to over 7,000 people. At the time of the interview, police said the newsletter had 5,000 subscribers and grossed over $300,000 per year. That's a lot in 1970s money. And also, if it's not sexual, why are people buying a newsletter? You usually have to unsubscribe from those. You can't even give those away. Norman was paroled in the fall of 1977, but was arrested again in Chicago in June 1978 for having sex with 2 underage boys from a local foster home and taking pornographic pictures of both. One of the boys informed investigators that Norman was in the process of selling him to a client, and Norman was simply waiting for his plane ticket. Norman was accused of refounding the Delta Project, now called the Creative Corps and MC Publications. Norman was accused of refounding the Delta Project, now called the Creative Corps and MC Publications, after being released from prison and operating it out of his apartment on West Wrightwood Avenue, allegedly sending photos of the... Oh, fuck, that scared me. Allegedly sending photos of the boys to a Don in Canada. In a raid of the apartment, 20,000 more pink index cards, or possibly 50 to 100,000, containing the names of customers, were found. In 1977, while Norman was still imprisoned, the victim who testified against Norman, leading to his conviction, was stabbed to death while walking home.
Throw out some Freemasonic or generally esoteric connections to put some strings together as far as legal systems. So the legal system is closely connected in its very essence to Freemasonry, or generally to mystery rites. What you have to understand is that Christianity and Satanism are two sides of the same coin. This is, in logic, what would be referred to as a logical fallacy. It's a false dichotomy, where you are presented with two options, kind of like left wing or right wing, or Democrat or Republican, and told to pick one, even though it's a sort of red herring in itself that leads you down a path that goes nowhere. So, in the mystery rites, it is well understood that the figure of Jesus, for example, whom, when you understand the cult of the dying and rising God, is also Adonis, or Attis, or Mithra, or Osiris, or Dionysus, Bacchus, another name for Dionysus, Eshman, so on and so forth. You understand that these characters are all representations of the same being, particularly throughout different cultures and throughout different periods of time. One God under many names. This is a concept which is particularly hard to get the mind-controlled population of humanity as it currently exists to understand. And this is why understanding the mystery rites is so important. Now, Mithra, who is Attis, or Adonis, or Eshman, or Dionysus, right, or Cyrus, Mithra is the Lord of contracts. Mithra is the Lord of law and legal bindings. This is Satanism, right? You do not need something like a Constitution of the United States, for instance, because that's my home country. You do not need a piece of paper that tells you what your freedoms are. That is never something that is in your favor. That is inherently limiting by its very premise, and it is that same Constitution. It is that same exact Constitution which gives authority to legal institutions and to governments, which are given the right to tax you, which is to steal from you, given the right to steal your property, like eminent domain, in the instance that they decide that they want to take your private property, so on and so forth. This is Satanism. Now, again, this is the legal system in its highest form. So, quoting from the works of Aleister Crowley, and I'm going to be going a little bit back and forth here, but all these concepts are interconnected. So, quoting from Aleister Crowley, Book of Thoth, the middle interpretation of this sign, and that is, he's talking about Scorpio here, is given by the serpent. So this is in reference to Ophiuchus, who is moreover the main theme of the sign. The serpent is sacred, lord of life and death, and its method of progression suggests the rhythmical undulation of those twin phases of life, which we call respectively life and death. The serpent is also, as previously explained, the principal symbol of male energy. From this, it will be seen that this card is, in a very strict sense, the completion of the card called Lust. The highest aspect of the card is the eagle, so on and so forth. The card itself represents the dance of death. The figure is a skeleton bearing a scythe, and both the skeleton and the scythe are importantly Saturnian symbols. This appears strange, as Saturn has no overt connection with Scorpio, but Saturn represents the essential structure of existing things. He is that elemental nature of things which is not destroyed by the ordinary changes which occur in the operations of nature. Furthermore, he is crowned with the crown of Osiris. He represents Osiris in the waters of Amenti. Yet more, he is the original secret male creative god. See Atu 15. This is the 15th major arcana tarot card he's referencing. Rejuent, Saturnia, Regna. It was only the corruption of the tradition, the confusion was set, and the cult of the dying god misunderstood, deformed and distorted by the Black Lodge that turned him into a senile and fiendish symbol. Yeah, whatever. The point is, right, Rejuent, Saturnia, Regna, and everything that I've already discussed, try to keep it all in mind. Taken from Aleister Crowley's work, Magic in Theory and Practice. The exalted devil Also, the other secret eye, this is from the formula of FIAO. By the formula of the initiation of Horus, elsewhere described in detail, this devil is called Satan or Shaitan and regarded with horror by people who are ignorant of his formula and imagining themselves to be evil, accuse nature herself of their own phantasmal crime. Satan is Saturn, Set, Abraxas, Adad, Adonis, Attis, Adam, Adonai, etc. Library of Congress, the Federal Pillars. Rejuent Saturnia Regna. Rejuent Saturnia Regna, the return of Saturn's reign. This is a newspaper printout from the late 1700s celebrating the ratification of the Constitution of the United States. Remember, Satan is Attis, Adonis, Jesus, Mithra, and his binding is legal. Legal binding. Notice how I'm stressing the legality portion here, right? Now, before I move on to the Freemason explanation, keeping in mind that Aleister Crowley was very much initiated into multiple divisions of Freemasonry and was in charge of the Ordo Templi Orientis, which originated specifically as a Freemasonic only organization, right? Crowley was initiated into the 33rd degree, the ancient accepted Scottish Rite. He was initiated into the Blue Lodge of Craft Masonry. He was initiated into some other lodge from France, and then bestowed degrees from John Yarker, who was the international Grand Master of the Memphis Mizraim Rite. So Crowley was very much a Mason, okay? Legality, Mason, Satanism. Now, Rejuent Saturnia Regna, the return of Saturn's reign, celebrating the ratification of the Constitution of the United States. It comes from the same poem, Virgil's Aeneid, that this comes from. Animet Septis Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order, right, with the Eye of Providence. This highly Masonic piece of symbolism here. This is all interconnected. This is all interconnected. Everything that I'm showing in this video of all of these sex trafficking rings and psychological operations and so on and so forth is all interconnected. Now, here's an individual in the know his name, or at least he goes by Israel Hadashi. It's simply a core search. Hopefully, if you've verified my own information for yourself, then you should know by now that I don't just say random things, and I don't just quote random people. This dude knows what he's talking about. After some extensive digging around, I'm changing my answer to reflect accuracy. It seems the Master Mason, Andrew Oxford, was right. John Adams was in fact a Freemason member of the St. John's Grand Lodge in Boston, Massachusetts, same as his cousin Samuel Adams. I've been trying to put together a list of all the Freemasons and Templars involved with the Constitution and Declaration, and found that a lot of people haven't been identified. It seems it wasn't an accident or coincidence either. And keep in mind, the Constitution was drafted specifically based off of old colonial charters, which were like corporate legal charters. Right, so anyway, the Constitution Declaration, and found that a lot of people haven't been identified. It seems it wasn't accident or coincidence either. If I had to guess, I'd say there was probably good reason for it. But that shouldn't come across as a surprise to anyone, considering how secretive the Masons are. Some things were probably a lot different back then, but the secretiveness hasn't changed. A few lodges I contacted in Europe said that not all lodges kept immaculate records back then. Some could have been lost or destroyed or locked away, but a Master of Scrolls confirmed that he and his cousin were members of St. John's Grand Lodge. The CIA said Washington was a master of deception, something I already knew, and employed several spies, two of which were John Adams and Ben Franklin, which makes sense since they were ambassadors. Maybe that has something to do with the limited info, or maybe he didn't attend a lot of events, who knows. But it's not uncommon by any means. I had a feeling John Adams was a Templar too, and I couldn't find anything for a while. Templars are Masons. All right, that's just the arch degrees, the York Rite. And I couldn't find anything for a while, but I finally found proof that he was, as I suspected. Adams, like many of his peers, was a lawyer and member of the Middle Temple, one of the four Inns of Court. Now, the Inns of Court. The Inns of Court in London are the professional association for barristers in England and Wales. There are 4 Inns of Court: Grey Inns, Lincoln's Inn, Inner Temple, and Middle Temple. All barristers must belong to one of them. They have supervisory and disciplinary functions over their members. Right. Middle Temple, John Adams. Description: Middle Temple, John Adams. Date: 1824, June 30th. The National Archives, Public Records, open document. What started my interest into this subject was a quote from Adams regarding the Constitution. I first saw the Constitution of the United States in a foreign country. I read it with great satisfaction. I found all the times he was in a foreign country. He was ambassador to London, where Middle Temple is located. When the Constitutional Convention was starting, he came back not long after it was done, so his first time seeing it had to be in London for the convention. Was it pre-drafted in London? Sounds crazy, right? I mean, just imagine. Lawyers committing trickery and deceit. Doesn't make any sense. But it happens that the original copy hangs on the walls in Middle Temple, the gathering place for lawyers. When you realize just how many lawyers were involved in drafting the Constitution, it's not far-fetched to think there was a chance that that copy is an original draft. In fact, I wouldn't doubt it. The Inns of Court were actually involved in the drafting of the very first American Constitution, called the Fundamental Orders, in 1693. Roger Ludlow, member of the Inner Temple, founded it there. And why would London want a copy of our Constitution, the document that allegedly separated us from them, and at the Inns of Court at that? Unless maybe they had a hand in creating it. There's a lot of vague and ambiguous language that went into the Constitution, none of it by accident. One of the things about lawyers is their ability to deceive with words, and I'm discovering that the majority of men involved were mostly lawyers and politicians, 2 of the most untrustworthy positions on earth. And it seems all, if not, were either Templars or Masons. Other known members of the Inns of Court include Arthur Middleton, Charles Jared Ingersoll, William Livingstone, John Dickinson, Charles Coatsworthy Pinckney, John Rutledge, Charles Pinckney, John Blair Jr., Thomas McKean, Arthur Middleton, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch Jr., William Paca, so on and so forth. And then a little excerpt from a quick search: Temple, London, Freemasonry lawyer. In London, there is a historical connection between the legal profession, particularly the Inner and Middle Temple, and Freemasonry, and the 2 institutions are based in close proximity. While many lawyers have been Freemasons, judging the organization offers no official or direct professional advantage. The legal profession and Freemasonry, the Inns of Court. The Inner and Middle Temple are 2 of London's 4 professional associations for barristers, known as the Inns of Court. Their historical sites are a short walk from Freemasons' Hall. This geographic closeness has fostered a social connection between lawyers and Freemasons over the centuries, legal experts and leadership. Sir David Wootton, a prominent London corporate lawyer and former Lord Mayor of London, exemplifies this connection. He holds a high-ranking position within the United Grand Lodge of England, the main governing body of Freemasonry in England and Wales. The first recorded Freemason in England, Elias Ashmole, worked as a solicitor in the 17th century. Because Mithra is the god of contracts. And Mithraism is the essence of the mystery rites. Mithra is an ancient Persian divinity of contracts, truth, and oaths. Mitra, meaning that which binds, or covenant. People invoked Mithra's name in promises and treaties, believing he enforced these sacred agreements. Right? This is all connected to the mystery rites. So don't ever think for a second that the esoteric side is just a small portion of this. It is not. It is a very large portion of all of this.